to Desk Careers, everybody. I'm so excited to have another amazing guest with us today. We welcome Emma Smyth, who is the Orthoptist and Quality and Risk Management Officer at Moorfields Eye Hospital here in Dubai. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's so exciting to have you here, and I am just so excited that I pronounced your job title properly.
Yeah, you did a very, very good job. Well done.
So I think, I normally like to talk with guests about how the journey began. And I think with you today, I'm more curious about what an orthoptist and quality risk manager officer is. What responsibilities do you have? And how did you come across this career?
Sure. So first of all, I'll start off with what an orthoptist is. So we are an allied health profession that specializes in the kind of assessment, diagnosis and treatment of children's vision problems, eye movement problems, squints, lazy eyes, and things like that. So we are kind of responsible for putting patches on kids' eyes and things like that. So in terms of how I kind of came across the profession, it is obviously, as you're aware, it's not a very common profession and not a lot of people have heard about it. I actually came across it because I was looking at kind of general allied health careers and nothing was kind of really jumping out at me. I was looking at optometry, but then we actually had some family friends who had two daughters who did orthoptics and I kind of spoke to them. I did half a day kind of shadowing in my local hospital when I was at school and then kind of went from there. So it is, as I said, an allied health profession. You go to university and you study orthoptics. So I did a 3-year degree in the University of Sheffield in England. And then it brings you out as a qualified orthoptist after those 3 years. So then I kind of practiced as an orthoptist, and then now my role has kind of evolved into kind of a dual role where I have a clinical role as an orthoptist kind of 1 to 2 days a week. And then I have an office-based job as my quality and risk management kind of side. So from that side of things, my kind of roles and responsibilities are around our kind of ensuring that we're providing the best possible patient care, ensuring that our surgical outcomes are meeting international standards, and of auditing, monitoring against various different standards, whether that is our kind of regulatory inspections, similar to what schools will have. We have inspections in the same way, and I kind of look at making sure we're in line with all of those things. Then there's kind of accreditation bodies. We get, people from outside to come in and make sure that we're meeting kind of international standards, are reporting back to our hospital in London. So that's kind of my quality role in a kind of short summary there.
It's really, really interesting. It almost sounds like it's where business meets healthcare and they kind of merge somewhere in the middle. Would
definitely is, yeah.
Would the risk management officer for quality and risk management, could you do that without being a certified orthoptist, or do you have to be?
No, you definitely can. So it will be something that people might go straight into. I definitely have found it very helpful to have my clinical role alongside it, because one of the roles as kind of in quality and risk management, you're often putting in processes and policies in place. And I find it very helpful to be able to look at those policies and processes as a clinical team member myself, so I can know how that's going to be implemented and how that's going to impact people on the ground. So in short answer, no, you don't have to be clinical, but I do think it is helpful.
Amazing. Okay, so now I want to go back in time. You were a secondary student. I know that science, psychology, healthcare, and art, those were the areas that you were really interested in. And I love that you put art on that list, because I know a lot of young people, it's almost like they think, I can't do creative subjects if I'm planning my future. How did you merge all of those academics and your creativity all together in that?
Yeah, so that actually was a really big challenge for me. And I think I did probably fall, maybe going back, I would probably maybe do things slightly differently, but I kind of fell to that kind of thing that I think a lot of people believe. So I did my A levels. I did all of those subjects: religious studies, psychology, human biology, and art for my AS levels. And then I got to the point where picking my A levels, and I felt like, because art was so kind of time and all consuming, I felt like I needed to drop one of my subjects. So I was at that kind of point of trying to decide, am I going to proceed down the kind of more artistic route, or am I going to go down the sciencey route? And I did feel like I had to make that decision at that point, and I did. So I actually dropped the art at AS level and then went down that route of more science. But I do think that is something that, although I have kind of been able to pick that up in, you know, my adult life now, I still enjoy drawing and painting and things. So I have brought that back in, but I do kind of think that it is something that I would want students to know, that you don't necessarily have to pick that one or the other. There is kind of ways that you can bring both in together, and that's something that I look back on
and I do,
wish
and
that
I
someone
think
had told me.
there's so many transferable skills that we gain from these creative subjects, thinking outside the box, being able to take a vision and make it come into life in the business world. And art would be definitely in your field of work, almost like the international language with some of your younger patients, especially in being able to get them to express themselves through that creative outlet. Now, I know that you work at Moorfields Eye Hospital here in Dubai. How does working for, I mean, a wonderful hospital such as Moorfields, how does that help your career journey to thrive? And how do you find that you're growing and you're dynamically, you know, thriving in your career journey as well?
So, I mean, anyone in the kind of eye world will know that Moorfields, especially, you know, Moorfields London, is a huge organization that is very, very well renowned in the eye community. So to have my first role as an orthoptist in Moorfields London was a huge achievement for me, and I think kind of really set me off on that really good journey for my career. And then obviously getting the opportunity to come over to Dubai, and it was fantastic for me, because I was young and I did want to do some traveling, but to have the opportunity to travel, see different parts of the world, but also continue to progress in my career was a really great opportunity for me. And then in terms of how my career has developed, I think that I have had opportunities here that I potentially wouldn't have had in other organizations or in other situations, because I now have this really great balance for me where I have this clinical role plus and a kind of management role, and that's not something that you would get everywhere. So I've had this opportunity to really build myself and broaden my career prospects, I guess, because as an orthoptist, it's very narrow. There is definitely things that you can do with it, but there's not a huge amount of scope there. But now to be able to bring in this management role, I could potentially move on to not an eye hospital. It could be a general hospital. It gives me a much more transferable career path in the future.
And I tell people career pathways with youth a lot, and getting them to really understand that the first step they take is not going to be the last step they take in their career. It's all about being growth driven and thinking further along the way.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons that it was definitely played a big role when I was picking my degree, was that I really believed at that time that I had to do a degree that led to a career. I didn't really understand, because one of the options for me at the time was to do psychology, but one of the main reasons I didn't do that was because I didn't know what I was going to graduate as. But then going to university, I realized that actually there's so many people that do that, and you don't have to have done something so rigid that brings you out in an exact career. But then conversely to that, I have now learned that even though I did do something very rigid, there is ways to open that back up again. So I guess either way works, really.
So there's no one definite final destination. There's always growth. Now, you mentioned that one of your career journey highlights is working for Moorfields Eye Hospital. When you fast forward and think, oh, the next milestones, how do you want to see yourself growing in your career? And I'll tell you why I ask you this. It's because young people think that going to university is almost that final destination, and then they they realize that actually it's employment. And then as they get to employment, they begin to have this who am I kind of identity. We won't call it a crisis, but it's almost like who am I and where do I fit in? And as you are growing in your career and thriving in your career, where do you see yourself heading, and what kinds of changes do you want to be experiencing as you start to develop further in your career?
I mean, I think that it's hard to say, because I never probably, because I joined Moorfields Dubai 5 years ago, and I didn't know that this is where I was going to be then. So it is ever evolving, but I definitely think that using the kind of, like I've said, the broadening of my career prospects from a subspecialty ophthalmology clinic, and taking those skills I've learned through my quality role and taking those and kind of moving into a more general hospital setting at some point would definitely be something that I'm interested in. I also really enjoy the kind of accreditation side of healthcare. So going in and inspecting organizations and ensuring that they are meeting standards. So that's definitely something that I would want to consider potentially in the future as well.
So many great things. And I know that Moorfields are in Abu Dhabi as well right now. So there's so much growth for you just here in the region as well. Super, super exciting. As we're coming to the end of this amazing conversation, Emma, talk to us about your top tips. So there's a young person watching this, or maybe a parent, or maybe an industry leader, and they're looking to you as a role model. What would you say have been those top 3 strategies that you've used to stay inspired in your career?
I think one of the things would be to pick something that you're really interested in. I've always been interested in healthcare. My mum was a nurse. I knew that that was a field that I had kind of been immersed in for a long time and would enjoy. So regardless of where I went in healthcare, it was always going to interest me. So I think that's definitely a key point, picking something that you're really passionate about, interested in. Even if you might not know exactly where that's going to take you, that interest and passion will always be helpful. Another point I think would be the importance of communication. And so I recently, slightly separately, I recently finished my master's degree. And one of the things that really reminded me that I didn't maybe pay enough attention to at uni was the skills that you take from doing assignments and reading text and being able to pull out all of the information. Like I never, at school, like English literature, things like that, I never really understood how those skills were going to transfer into my life. But I've now kind of realized that all of that is building on your communication skills. And I think living in a country like Dubai, where you have so many different people from so many different backgrounds, having a really good basis in your ability to write, written communication and spoken communication is really important and will benefit you across any career. So I think that would be something that I would advise.
Fantastic. Would you say that this career of working in healthcare and working as an orthoptist is definitely something that young people should be looking towards? Is this a career that you think is a thriving career for the future?
I definitely do, yes. I mean, especially if you're someone who is interested in working with children, we work a lot with children, and that's a really important aspect of the role. And that is something that, if you enjoy, is so fulfilling. No matter how stressful your day is, when you go into a clinic and you get to deal with young children, it brings a smile to your face. So I think that, yeah, it's definitely a very fulfilling career. And there is a lot of avenues to it. It can look quite narrow, but there is a lot of options to broaden it out as well.
Thank you so much, Emma. That was an excellent points of view, and everything that you brought up was so very interesting. I know that we'll have very, very curious learners that may want to be reaching out to you, but we will have to say thank you, and we're right at the end here, and that brings us to the end of another amazing conversation. Today we spoke with Emma Smyth, who is the Orthoptist and Quality and Risk Management Officer at Moorfields Eye Hospital here in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Desk Careers Digital Spotlight.